Greetings, everyone. I'm Danielle Palli, and as you know, I'm a nationally board certified positive psychology and mindfulness coach, author, and book coach. And today I'm really excited because I have my friend and fellow coach, Toni Bator, with me today. She is a certified neurodiversity and positive psychology coach. Toni, thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to this.
Me too. So the reason I really wanted to have some conversations with you, Toni, is because of your specialty areas, focusing on topics such as ADHD, working with neurodiversity and autism clients, and also with the
Mm.
LGBTQIA plus communities. So a lot of knowledge. So we're going to do this in three parts. Part one, today we'd like to talk a little bit more about ADHD. And I have just a few questions for Toni, and she's going to give us some really helpful and enlightening information. No pressure, Toni.
Hopefully not.
So, what challenges do people with ADHD find, say, first in their personal lives? What have you noticed?
Mm. Well, before I even get into that, I want to explain that there are actually two types of ADHD. One is the inattentive, which some of the symptoms are that individuals don't listen, they're easily distracted. There's a tendency to lose things, forgetfulness. They can't sustain attention easily. Um, they have they make mistakes a lot, and there's that disorganization.
Okay.
And then there's the hyperactive, impulsive type, and that type can interrupt and be intrusive. Also loud and restless, blurts out, fidgety. You think about the ADHD child, in school, that's just like can't sit still. They have a motor running, right? Um, they can't wait their turn, driven by a motor.
Okay.
So if you think about that and you think about how these different symptoms can affect someone's personal life, right? You're a relationship coach, right?
Yes. What I've noticed, and you could please expand on this, particularly with relationships between couples, is one will make decisions and be like, if they're talking about going somewhere, the one is like 2 miles down the block before the other one's gotten their sneakers on. They're just making decisions without including their partner and not
Mm-hmm.
realizing how this could be a challenge. Some of the other things, as you've mentioned, they're having a conversation and someone with ADHD might be off someplace else and the partner thinks you don't care. What? You're not listening to me, and they're not doing it on purpose. So is that in line with some of what you've noticed?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right, it's not intentional. And they may not even be aware that they're doing these things. Um, but they do. They do these things, and it can be very frustrating. Um, I work with many individuals, who have partners, and the partner who is neurotypical really struggles because the person with ADHD, I mean, it bleeds over into their entire personal life, right? The disorganization, having piles of things. And, I'll get to that later, right? They have so many interests and hobbies. And yeah, there's so many ways in which it can be really challenging for the
Okay.
partner.
And before we close, we're going to offer some tips. We're not just going to present the problem, but we're going to come up with some solutions. Now, you mentioned it spills over into other parts of their life. So, how does it impact someone in the workplace?
Mm, yeah, the workplace is very difficult, especially when the individual has more of the inattentive type of ADHD. So they have problems with focus and concentration, um, time management. There's something called time blindness that they really can't anticipate how long something is going to take. Um, there's also, procrastination, not being able to meet deadlines, and emotional regulation.
The big one. And I'm
Mm.
curious about with the time blindness.
Mhm.
I've worked with people who have ADHD, and I'll say, well, it's hard to block your time unless you know where your time's going. And for some people, they can track. And I'll say, just for this week, when you do this task, write down when you start and stop so you can get a sense. Now, that works for some people, but other
Mm.
people, that stresses them out. What do you think is stressful about that process?
Um, I think that people may have, they may find that challenging when they have that structure and routine
Yeah,
because it's kind of like a double-edged sword. They need it, but don't want it.
I gotcha. Okay. So I'd like to talk about some solutions because the solutions to what's happening in their personal life and in their productive workplace lives are similar. And I think you can offer a couple of tips that people can take away if they're watching this video. I wanted to start with the first one because I know you and I
Mhm.
are both active meditators.
Mm.
You had said that you meditate some 30 minutes a day.
Mhm.
My routine is about the same. So, one of the things I've noticed in terms of my own practice and people that I work with, not even just who have ADHD, just everyone in developing emotional regulation, greater flexibility, memory, and problem solving. And really, we're just talking about executive functioning. Pausing so that the amygdala, fight or flight, freeze, doesn't react, goes to executive functioning where all the good decisions happen.
Yes, and I offer that as an option. I will provide resources for my clients, and mindfulness meditation is definitely something that I recommend. And people do try it, and some people, swear by it. They like, oh, this is wonderful. I noticed that it's making a difference in my life. Other people will say, I have so many ruminating thoughts that, I can't do this, and so yeah, yeah,
When
it
they
all
have the
depends.
ruminating thoughts, and that's one kind of, I think, ace up my sleeve in working with mindfulness, is that I
Mhm.
just want people to understand there's different types of mindfulness tools and there's different meditation techniques. So as soon
Yes.
as someone says, I can't shut my mind off, I'm all over the place, I give their mind something to do. Okay, we're going to visualize, we're going to walk down to the beach, we're going to imagine putting our toes in the water. So the whole point is if one doesn't work, there might be another mindfulness tool that does work. But there are other tips that you have for us as well. And what would those be?
Guided meditation.
Hmm.
And that's what I personally use because I will have the ruminating mind also. And I know it's common when people meditate, right? We don't, you're going to have thoughts that come up, right?
Yes.
And, I recommend that they just note what the thought is and let it go, right? Um, Also, journaling, getting all those thoughts out before you try to get some sleep at night,
Yes.
letting it all go. Um, but aside from the emotional regulation, there are many strategies and tools that people can use for organization, time management. You think about time management, one of my favorites is time blocking
Okay.
and calendars. I put everything on my calendar. Um, if I'm going to exercise on Tuesday and Thursday, I put that in there. It's a non-negotiable. Nothing's
Yes.
going to interfere with it. If someone is working on a project, um, they'll devote, a few hours a week and they will put that into the calendar and to ensure that they're working on this project, right?
Okay. So time
Yeah.
blocking is very specifically like from 9 to 10, I do this, from 11 to
Hmm.
12. Okay.
And offering a buffer time.
Yes.
And
Thank you
speaking
for
about
saying
us,
that.
right?
Yes.
I mean, coaching, how draining that can be. And you find out, right, that you really need that buffer time.
Yes. And the buffer time is great because what I found, with a lot of people, you might like I create that in my own schedule. You probably do as well, but other people when they come to me they're like, well, I have my day planned for 8 hours, and I'm like, but where's the time to like use the restroom, make a cup of tea, like or if something takes longer than you expect, maybe you don't want to have 10 things on that day. Maybe you want to have 6 or 7. And then you're not berating yourself for not getting the other 3 done.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are so many tools. Some of my other favorites are the Pomodoro method.
Oh, I
Where,
don't know this. Please tell me.
okay, this is where if someone has difficulty starting a task, um, they have a timer and they'll do the task for like 25 minutes. And once the timer goes off, they get up and they do something completely different for like 5 minutes. They go outside, they take, they do something and then they come back and they do it for another 25 minutes. So it's little tiny steps, chunks of time that allows them to
Yeah.
come back to the task so they're not as overwhelmed.
And I think that's good for everybody. Because
Hmm.
how many of us sit down with a task and it's like, this is going to take me all day and I don't even want to get started. So I'm going to do all these other little tasks. But if you say, you know what, I'm just going to do, you said, is 25 minutes the sweet spot?
Yeah, it appears to be. Yeah.
Okay. And so
Well,
that could be a
yeah.
tool for anyone. If there's any task you don't want to do the laundry for 25 minutes, go to
Mhm.
something else, come back.
And that's so true. And, people do use that in their home life. If they have taxes that are overdue, they will do that and say, I'm going to do taxes this weekend. I am going to try the Pomodoro method. Another thing they'll use is the body doubling.
Okay.
This is where you have another individual who can be working on something entirely different, but they're working with you. Many people even do this via Zoom. There are companies that offer body doubling where you're with someone else, you're working on a different task, but just to have that other person there is motivating.
It's the accountability buddy. It's like having a buddy to go to the gym, even if you do separate workouts.
Hmm.
Or, I hear of silent writing where people get on Zoom calls and they're all writing and they might not be interacting, but it's like we've all committed to this time. That's wonderful. So body doubling,
Body
that's the
doubling.
official name.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're probably familiar with the Eisenhower matrix for
I am not.
prioritization.
This is why you're on the show. Tell me.
Okay. And these are all tools that, any of us could use, right? The Eisenhower matrix is to determine what is important and what is urgent and none important. And so it's like a graph and you write down what is totally important and urgent, what needs to be done first, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And all of these can be found online. And I can send you some resources if there's any way for you to put them on the station.
Absolutely. I would love to share them. And it's interesting. Didn't know the term, but sometimes when I'm working with people, I'll say, have you ever wrote down your to-do list? No. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, well, let's start off by writing the list. And then we can break out what's the once and dones, what is the
Yep.
ongoing that's going to take the next year. And like you said, what's the priority? Because when they're looking at everything, they might be freaked out. I was like, yeah, but we're only going to pull a couple things for this day and a couple more for this day. And if you are on this day, don't be don't be determined to look over here and freak yourself out. Just focus on this.
Yeah, yeah. And energy management.
Oh,
That's a big one, especially for me. I'm a morning person. So I have to do all of my taxing cognitive work in the morning. And by 5 a.m., I'm done. I cannot do any more, really intensive cognitive work. And other people are different.
so you're up early in the morning, and then like by 5 p.m. You're like nothing taxing after that certain time period.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
And some people are night owls, so they'll do all of that, primary intense work in the evening.
That makes total sense. And again, all these tools are good for anyone. So,
Mm, yeah. Yeah.
Toni, this has been very informative, helpful not only to me as a coach, but hopefully some helpful tools. And yes, in the description of this podcast, I'm going to put how people can get in touch with you and your website, and also some of the resources that you're going to send. Toni, thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Namaste.